In Delta Force, there's no such thing as a small mistake. When you operate in the darkest corners of the world, where a single sound can mean the difference between mission success and total failure, every action carries weight. Every decision has consequences. And when something goes wrong, the ripple effects don't stop at the individual who made the error. This isn't about perfection. Delta Force doesn't expect their operators to be perfect. What they demand is something far more difficult: absolute reliability under pressure. Because in their world, a mistake doesn't just mean starting over or getting a second chance. It can mean lives lost, intelligence compromised, or an entire operation unraveling in seconds. Today, we're going to explore what actually happens when a Delta Force operator makes a mistake during a mission. Not the Hollywood version, not the sanitized public relations story, but the real consequences, the hidden protocols, and the psychological weight that comes with failing when the stakes are this high. Every Delta Force operator understands something fundamental from day one. In their line of work, individual actions have exponential consequences. Unlike conventional military units, where roles are more compartmentalized, Delta operators function in small teams, where each person's performance directly impacts everyone else's survival. When you're part of a six-man team infiltrating hostile territory, there's no redundancy for error. If the communications specialist fails to maintain secure links, the entire team operates blind. If the breacher miscalculates an entry point, the element of surprise vanishes. If the medic freezes under fire, someone dies. This creates a unique psychological dynamic. Delta operators don't just carry the weight of their own survival. They carry the knowledge that their teammates have entrusted them with their lives, based on the assumption that they will execute their role flawlessly when it matters most. That trust isn't given lightly, and it's never forgotten. Here's where most people misunderstand what constitutes an error in Delta Force. It's not primarily about physical failures or missed shots. Those are symptoms of deeper problems. What Delta Force really evaluates is decision-making under pressure, situational awareness, and adherence to principles that keep teams alive. A mistake might be failing to communicate a change in enemy movement because you assumed someone else saw it. It could be taking an unnecessary risk because you wanted to prove something to yourself. It might be hesitating for 2 seconds when immediate action was required, or acting impulsively when patience was the only viable option. The most serious mistakes often have nothing to do with technical skills. They stem from judgment errors, communication breakdowns, or violations of established protocols that exist for very specific reasons. Delta Force has learned through decades of operations that the most dangerous failures happen in the mind before they happen in the field. When a mistake happens during an active operation, the consequences are immediate and cascading. Let's be clear about what this means in practice. Delta Force missions often involve incredibly tight timing windows, complex coordination between multiple elements, and operating in environments where the enemy has home field advantage. One operator's error can instantly compromise the entire team's position. It can force a change in the mission plan while everyone is already committed. It can create situations where other operators have to take additional risks to compensate for what just went wrong. And in the worst cases, it can turn a surgical operation into a desperate fight for survival. What happens in those moments reveals everything about how Delta Force actually operates. There's no time for blame or emotion. The team adapts. Other operators immediately shift to cover the gap created by the mistake. The team leader makes rapid decisions about whether to continue, adjust, or abort based on the new reality they're facing. When something goes wrong, Delta has a clear hierarchy of priorities. First comes the immediate safety of the team. Second comes mission completion, but only if it's still viable given the changed circumstances.
Third comes damage control and extraction. Everything else is secondary. This means that if an operator's mistake has created a situation where lives are at risk, the mission gets reassessed in real time. Delta doesn't believe in pointless heroics or completing objectives at any cost. They believe in calculated risk and bringing everyone home when possible. The operator who made the mistake doesn't get pulled from the operation unless they're physically unable to continue. They're expected to recognize what happened, refocus, and contribute to solving the problem they helped create. This isn't about punishment in the moment. It's about operational necessity and maintaining team cohesion when it matters most. Once the team is back on friendly ground, the real examination begins. Delta Force conducts after-action reviews that are legendarily thorough and brutally honest. Every decision gets scrutinized. Every moment of the operation gets reconstructed. And if a mistake occurred, it will be identified and analyzed in detail. These reviews aren't designed to humiliate anyone. They're designed to extract lessons that might save lives on the next mission. The operator who made the error is expected to be the most honest voice in the room about what they did wrong and why. Deflection or excuse-making is culturally unacceptable.
What's remarkable about this process is that it separates the person from the mistake. Delta Force is ruthlessly objective about identifying what went wrong, but they also understand that even the most skilled operators are human. The question isn't whether someone is perfect. The question is whether they can learn, adapt, and be trusted not to make the same mistake again. Here's what most people don't understand. The consequences of mistakes in Delta Force often happen completely outside public view. There are no formal reprimands that appear in official records. There are no public announcements. The operator doesn't get demoted or reassigned in ways that would be visible to outsiders. Instead, the consequences are far more personal and immediate. The operator might lose the trust of their teammates, which in this culture is more devastating than any formal punishment. They might find themselves not getting selected for certain high-value missions. They might face increased scrutiny during training rotations and evaluations. In some cases, particularly if the mistake revealed fundamental judgment issues or repeated patterns of poor decision-making, the operator might be quietly counseled to consider other assignments. This isn't presented as punishment. It's presented as a realistic assessment of whether they're suited for the unique demands of Delta Force operations. When mistakes happen during classified operations, especially those that never officially occurred, the psychological impact becomes even more complex. The operator can't discuss what happened with anyone outside their immediate team. They can't seek outside perspective or support. They carry the weight of their error in complete silence. This creates a unique form of pressure. There's no public accountability, which might sound like a relief, but it also means there's no public context, no way to process the experience through normal channels, and no closure that comes from external validation or understanding. The mistake becomes a private burden, known only to the people who were there and the leadership who reviewed what happened. For some operators, this weight becomes manageable through the tight bonds within their team. For others, it creates psychological strain that accumulates over time and multiple deployments. Delta Force's intense focus on reducing individual mistakes isn't about creating perfect soldiers. It's about recognizing a mathematical reality. When you operate in small teams in denied territory against sophisticated adversaries, the margin for error approaches zero. They've learned through hard experience that preparation is the only reliable way to reduce mistakes under pressure. This is why their training is so demanding, why they rehearse operations until actions become automatic, why they study past missions obsessively, why they maintain incredibly high standards for who stays in the unit. Every protocol exists because someone, somewhere, learned a lesson the hard way. Every standard operating procedure represents accumulated wisdom about what keeps operators alive and missions successful. When an operator makes a mistake, it's often because they deviated from these principles, either through inexperience, overconfidence, or a momentary lapse in discipline.
There's an unspoken understanding in Delta Force about mistakes and consequences. If you make an error, but own it completely, learn from it, and demonstrate that you've genuinely internalized the lesson, the unit will give you another chance. But that chance comes with invisible strings attached. You'll be watched more closely, your judgment will be questioned more thoroughly, and the expectation is that you'll never make that specific mistake again. Not because you'll be punished if you do, but because you've proven you can't be trusted with the lives of your teammates if you repeat preventable errors. This creates enormous internal pressure to perform flawlessly, not from fear of official consequences, but from the desire to regain the full trust of the people whose opinions matter most. For many operators, this internal motivation is far more powerful than any external punishment could ever be. When mistakes happen during operations that officially don't exist, the handling becomes even more nuanced. There's no paper trail, no formal investigation, no administrative record that acknowledges the mission even happened, let alone that something went wrong during it. The accountability exists entirely within the unit. The operator knows what they did, their teammates know, the leadership knows, and that knowledge shapes every interaction and decision going forward, even though nothing is ever written down or formally acknowledged. This creates a system where reputation and trust become the primary currency. Your standing in the unit isn't determined by your official record, which might be completely fabricated for security purposes. It's determined by what the people who've operated with you know about your judgment, reliability, and ability to perform under the most extreme pressure.
Living with a mistake from a Delta Force operation is psychologically complex in ways that are difficult to explain to anyone who hasn't experienced it. The operator knows that their error had real consequences. Maybe it forced the team to adapt their plan mid-operation. Maybe it put someone at additional risk. Maybe it meant an objective wasn't achieved. But they can't talk about it, can't process it through normal means, can't even acknowledge to their own family that something significant happened that they're struggling with. The mistake becomes a ghost that follows them, visible only to the small number of people who share their classified world. Some operators channel this into fierce determination to never fail again. They use the experience as fuel for even more rigorous preparation and focus. Others struggle with the isolation of carrying that weight in silence. The psychological impact varies, but it's always significant. What Delta Force understands about mistakes and consequences offers insights that extend far beyond military operations. They've learned that the most dangerous errors are usually preventable, that preparation and discipline are the only reliable ways to perform under pressure, that owning your mistakes completely is the only path to learning from them. They've also learned that creating a culture where people can admit errors without being destroyed is essential for organizational learning. Delta Force is ruthlessly honest about mistakes, but they separate the error from the person. They focus on whether someone can learn and improve, not on permanent condemnation. Most importantly, they understand that accountability doesn't require public spectacle or formal punishment to be effective. Sometimes the most powerful consequences are the ones only a small group of people know about, the ones that exist in the realm of trust, reputation, in the quiet knowledge of whether you can be relied upon when everything is on the line. When a Delta Force operator makes a mistake during a mission, what happens isn't a simple story of punishment or redemption. It's a complex process of immediate adaptation, thorough analysis, personal accountability, and invisible consequences that reshape their standing within the unit. The public will never hear about most of these incidents. There will be no press releases, no official acknowledgments, no detailed reports. The mistakes happen in silence, are handled in silence, and remain in silence. But within the tight circle of people who operate in that world, nothing is forgotten.
Delta Force doesn't expect perfection because perfection isn't human. What they demand is something harder: the ability to make sound decisions under impossible pressure, the discipline to follow principles that keep people alive, and the character to own your failures completely when they inevitably occur. Because in their world, that's not just about being a good soldier. It's about being someone your teammates can trust with their lives when everything goes wrong.